Welcome to Truth and Testimony, the broadcast, where we teach the Word of God. You will also hear about world news and how it relates to Bible prophecy, plus interviews and testimonials from men and women of God who have devoted their lives to serving Yahshua, Jesus Christ our Lord. Now, without further ado, let's get to our host, Adrian Scott.
Greetings and shalom. I am Adrian Scott, and I welcome you to Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. You may notice this is a bit of a different visual, although you can still recognize some of the my brick wall there that I use from time to time. But trying something a little bit different, and we're going to see how this goes. So I figure if one of the issues that I'm having is not having enough time to sit at my lovely computer here and edit all of these different videos, which I'm still going to do, it would be nice to be able to still have something for people to check out and just kind of correspond with people and let you know how things are going and maybe share a little bit of wisdom, or opportunity for you to gain your own wisdom. And so, I guess maybe in a roundabout way, I'm kind of, thinking like this is sort of my version of Ray's My Daily Walkabout videos that he does, where it's just kind of speaking from the heart, and what's on the mind and what's going on in the world and stuff like that, and to just try to stay connected and involved. And then I will get around to, editing when I can. As it is, I'm still continuing to find some struggle in having enough time to do editing. And I have to say, this is not me whining or anything, at least I don't think it is, that, on this particular channel, it is a case where, Ray and I we're a two-person team here. Although really, I guess we can start sort of considering Susan and potentially my wife, Kristen, potentially a part of the channel as well. But even with that, it is still a case where we are having to do everything ourselves. All of the recording, all of the pre-production of researching material, gathering scriptures or whatever references we need for a video, doing the recording, and then after all of that, having to do all of the editing and the uploading and everything else. It's not like we are a big team here and we have, the people behind the scenes doing the grunt work while we're looking pretty on camera. No, we have to do it all. So, it does make it more of a challenge, and we're doing it. We've been doing it and we will continue to do so. And, at some point, I am probably not too far away from retirement from my full-time regular job. And once that happens, I'll still be collecting a paycheck. I'm very blessed and fortunate to be in that position to have that. But it will mean I'll have a lot more time to sit here and do this stuff. So, which I'd really like to do. This is what I'd rather be doing if this was a full-time job for me. But at this point, it's not. So until then, this is kind of the compromise. So there's kind of the preamble and everything. Maybe I'll have to try to come up with a name for this. But yeah, so it'll be my, I'll think of some kind of clever name. Maybe by the time I get this posted online. But the idea was to not have to do much editing, that I could still communicate stuff and just get it up quickly. So this is our test to do that. Let's check it out. So basically, all I wanted to really do was, there was kind of a topic I wanted to touch on a little bit, and just a little bit of what's going on in world events. Because, the world is a crazy place right now, and there is a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, from my perspective, in fact, I think I could safely say from the perspective of every one of us on this channel, Israel is a big focal point in that, because aside from other things, we do, or at least I feel, that a lot of biblical prophecy is going to be fulfilled specifically regarding that land and those people. And so we should be interested and involved on what's going on over there. And so one of the things that's really been, it has been saddening at times. I found when anyone that's followed the channel for a while will know that at one point back in October of 2023, when a lot of craziness started going on October 7th in Israel, that myself and my friend Kevin were in Israel at that time, and we ended up actually getting stranded there. And by the amazing work of my wonderful wife, she was actually able to make travel arrangements for us to get out when a lot of people were stranded. At the best, they had short flights that the local airline, El Al, I believe they're called, were flying to Athens, Greece, to just get people out of Israel, at least to Athens, Greece, and then they could make, follow-up travel arrangements from there. But there was a long, long line of people waiting to do that. Anyway, so we were stuck there, and we were there when all these events were starting to transpire. And on the heels of that, I located an app, which I did put on my smartphone. And it basically was an early warning system. So whenever there were, because if anyone watched my Israel videos, you know that we're walking down the street and all of a sudden the air raid sirens would go off and you had to seek shelter and do all that. I found this app that would give you sort of an early warning system to any of those sirens going off and having to look for shelter. And I just maintained that app even after we left Israel. And it has been unfortunate to see that most of every day there are multiple alarms going off on my phone from that app, which notifies that there are incoming rockets. And furthermore, I should add that you could select the entire country in this app to be notified for all different regions when an alarm was going off. That if I had all the alarms for all of the country on, which I did for the first couple of days, basically alarms were going off almost nonstop. And I'm not exaggerating with that. So eventually I reduced it down to only getting alarm notifications if the threat was to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, which are basically the two central cities, like geographically the central cities in the country. Because if things have, there are continually skirmishes and little things going on along the various borders. That's a sad reality of what's going on. But when it involves Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, I just thought it was a bit bigger of a deal. And so it lets me know when something significant is going down without having this thing going off continually. And again, like if it was all notified, it was going off almost continually. So just that's, kind of the state of what's going on. Even after these ceasefires were agreed to and all this stuff happened, and I'm not just talking about right now, I'm talking about previous occasions as well, that, it usually didn't take too terribly long after the ceasefire that there would continue to be alarms sounding on my phone. Not as often as at other times, but they still were happening. So this is an ongoing thing over there. And I will point out, because I'm sure there's, a lot of people out there that are anti-Israel, and the number seems to be growing there. But in every one of these cases, Israel has been acting from a position of self-defense. Unless there's something going on secretly and covertly, which I can't utterly rule out, they have been acting from a place of self-defense, and it's been the people around them that have been the initiators pretty much every time. And another one that is true, and this one's documented, is every time that they've tried to come up with some two-state solution to divide the land and have a portion for this group of people and a portion for this group of people, that to the best of my knowledge, in just about every example, Israel has agreed to the terms, even when it would have meant a loss of land for them. They still agreed to the terms for the sake of peace, but the other side rejected them. And you can look at the documentation to verify that yourself. So there's a lot of events going on there, and I do think that although it's that part of the world, by the nature of biblical prophecy and just how everything is going to be fulfilled, that it involves the rest of the world. even if you're not directly in the Middle East. So it should be of interest to us. And so I've been watching that. And of course, one of the more recent events to go on was so Israel had launched an initiative to disable the nuclear capabilities of Iran. Now, to me, and this is my personal perspective, I'm old enough that I go back to kind of the tail end of the Cold War, which was, this constant looming threat of nuclear destruction between, at the time, Russia and the United States. And that really, one of the main things that prevented that from actually occurring is this idea, this principle that they call MAD, M-A-D, mutually assured destruction. That if the one side launched their nukes, which is true, then the other side they might get destroyed, but they'd have enough time to launch theirs back first. So everyone ends up getting destroyed. There is no winner. And that kind of, I think, lent itself to preventing anything from actually happening at that time. Although there were still a couple of instances where things got close. But I think you're looking at a little bit of a different dynamic when you're dealing with a regime like that is in Iran. And I'm not speaking about the Iranian people. I know many of them would be happy to see this regime go. But that this regime that is in power there under the Ayatollah, it would be a blessing to them to actually bring about this destruction and this death in multiple ways. It would be a really good thing for them. So they don't have, even if it resulted in their own destruction, they don't have the same inhibitions that prevent them from actually using something like that. And that's why I think it is particularly important that they cannot have the capability of producing nuclear bombs. Now, you can get whatever debates about they're not making nuclear bombs or whatever. I think most people get the reality that, right, no, they would absolutely do that, I think, if they could. Anyway, so they needed to be stopped. And Israel launched an initiative to take care of that. There had been a period of time that had been set for talks to go on about them Iran shutting down their ability to enrich uranium to the point of making weapons and all of this production, that it would cease. And those talks ended with no result. It was the next day after those talks ended that Israel launched a very precise and targeted attack to target those facilities and some of the people involved directly with those facilities. And it seems like, by all indications, it was a pretty strong success. However, there were some locations that were deep enough underground, that they were sheltered enough, that Israel did not have the capability to reach those locations. However, the United States did have the technology to do that. And we're going back maybe a week or so now, maybe a bit more at this point. But they did, in fact, use that and sent those B-2 bombers in with what I guess they call them bunker busters, and took out these buried facilities that Israel couldn't get to. So although I think that a case could be made, it may not have stopped their ability to try and do this. I think they will try to continue. I would expect, seriously hampered them and slowed their timetable down significantly, I would think. And by all accounts, that particular strike was pretty successful as well. And by successful, I'm talking about, you're trying to get the job done with as minimal, impact on civilians as utterly possible. And it seems like it was a pretty good success on both sides for that. However, it does, of course, ramp up tensions there, and now more stuff is going on. So this is why it's a good idea, and you need to be careful of your sources, because I think most people get it nowadays that, frankly, the legacy media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to refer to that group as, can't necessarily be trusted, that they are not the way I put it, at least in the case of one of these agencies, these news agencies, I use air quotes there, is that it's not a news agency, it's an opinion agency, but they're passing off their opinion as if it is news. And that's the main reason I have a problem with them, on all 3 letters of their name. Wink, wink. So you have to be careful who you're listening to. I would say, don't just take my word for it. I am not abreast of everything that's going on. I don't know all the details. I always say that about the best you can do is try to get some perspectives on both sides of the picture. And when you can find the commonalities between those perspectives, that's usually, you're going to find some of the truth in that area where it overlaps. So that's about the best thing we can try and do. And just know that even if you go to one of those sources, don't just take it as gospel, that they may or may not be incorrect, intentionally or unintentionally, and just take it with a grain of salt, that there probably is some truth to it, but it could be getting worked in such a way to, further a particular agenda, which is where the loss of trust has come in for a lot of people with those agencies now. So it is good to keep yourself informed, and just do the best you can to temper that information. Try to combine it from multiple sources. Try to verify it in some other way outside of just taking whoever's word for it. Same thing I say about, us on this channel. Don't just take our word for it. Go inform and educate yourself. Same thing with this, but you should be informed. So that's kind of the big one there. We'll have to see what developments come out of there now, but I can say that since then, since those 2 attacks, in particular the US one taking out those remaining facilities, the alarms have increased in frequency again in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So the rocket launches are continuing unabated, though it's not quite as frequent as it was at one point, but it's still one a day, one every other day is still too much, and I am concerned about, loss of civilian life on either side of this. I'm not picking one side when it turns about innocent people who are just trying to work their jobs and take care of their families and do, their day-to-day activities, that they just keep, unfortunately, by being in the wrong area, I can't even call it the wrong area, but being in that area, that they are affected by this through no fault of their own, really, in many cases. So, I do pray, and I ask anyone out there watching this that you would continue to pray for the innocents there, that civilian impact would be as minimal as possible all the way around. If you're a civilian and you still are wanting for the destruction of Israel, then I think you've made your choice. And to me, you're at that point no longer a civilian. But so there's that. There's more things I could say, but I don't want to start turning it into a finger pointing session. So I'll let it go there. There's kind of the current events there. There's lots of crazy stuff going on in our country here, Ray and I, our home country of Canada. And we have a political party and a political leader that are very clearly pushing a particular agenda. And I don't think that agenda is necessarily a good one. They're couching it in all the right language to make it sound good and look good and giving it a good paint job. But ultimately, everything they're trying to do, the end result is less freedom for people in a country that already has a distinct lack of freedom. Or I should, maybe I couldn't even say that. To try to be as fair as possible, yes, you have freedom in Canada. The catch is, as long as the government determines that you have that freedom. We have this wonderful Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but we've already seen during the pandemic that can be taken away when they deem that it's needed to, that you don't have rights at that point. And there's a lot of people that can speak to that one. So yeah, there's stuff going on in Canada. So pray for Canada, but really pray for the world. I mean, there's just so much craziness. There's craziness going on in the States. There's craziness going on in Canada. And there's certainly craziness going on in the Middle East, as there has been for a long time. One that really disturbed me recently was hearing a story. I don't know how bad this is, or even what people are generally thinking of this over in England. But people apparently, if I saw the information correct, and this is me, kind of taking it with that grain of salt, that are literally getting arrested and possibly detained for saying things that might be taken the wrong way. Just because they could possibly be taken the wrong way, they're actually getting arrested. And I found some video clips which show the police arresting some people, so it seems there's at least enough evidence to say something's going on there. But if that's the case, then that poor country, I feel for the people there who actually enjoy freedom, because it really looks like a lot of that freedom is gone too. One of those most protected things in the United States is this concept of freedom of speech. That, as anyone who's an advocate and a defender of this would point out, is it's not the speech that you agree with that needs to be defended. It's the speech that you don't agree with that needs the defending. That you don't have to agree with it, but that people should have the right to say it. And I would, couch that with the idea, unless they're clearly calling for active violence or something, like that needs to be not happening. So, but that freedom of speech, or loss of it, it can be subtle, but it can be very profound. And it can escalate to some really dark things, I think, quickly, if given the chance. So, things that we should be aware of. And it's kind of funny, because you see in these countries that are really going through a lot of this right now, that historically have been viewed as being very free countries, like the US and Canada and England and places like that, that a lot of immigrants to those countries who have come from countries that really have a pronounced history of those things recognize it, and it is scaring them to say, wait a minute, that shouldn't be happening here. This is what I fled from. And now it's going on here too. And unfortunately, I do think that, basically the Bible says that's going to happen. And all you can do is hold on, be prepared, have that community of people around you if you can, and be a support for each other, and a voice of encouragement to each other, because things are going to get dark. There's a very much a light at the end of the tunnel. But things are going to get dark before that point, worse than anything that has been seen, according to scriptures. So, we need to be ready for that. Be vigilant, be informed, and do not fear or be faint of heart, because the Bible does say that God will not forsake you or leave you. And there's that great little kind of poem, the story, as it were, about the footprints in the sand, right? Where you see these two sets of footprints, and at the points in your life that were the worst, that there was only one set of footprints. And, one person says, well, that's where God left you. And God is like, no, that's when I carried you. Yeah. So I always love that little story, and remember that one, because I do think there's some truth to that. On that note, switching over to my other little topic, something that my wife and I were chatting about the other day, and we are talking about this idea of doing this. We're going to probably do it as an audio podcast. There's a number of reasons for that, but where we basically just kind of want to sit down between the two of us and kind of talk about what's going on in our world and the things that we're going through, and how that. Because, when we're going through our own trials and tribulations, and then we see these provisions that are provided to deal with that stuff, and we know that that is God at work in our lives, And if we can offer that up to somebody else to be a word of encouragement to them, to hang in there, he is involved, he is aware of what's going on, and given the opportunity, he is there to care for you. He is Abba. Yes, he's the king of the universe, and there's a respect and there's a formality to that, but he is also Abba. He is dad. And like any dad, he wants to take care of his kids. So, if we can offer some encouragement by relating some of those stories that happen with us, and then also just our take on various world events that are going on, like the stuff in the Middle East. And we have kind of an interesting perspective because I'm Canadian. I'm from the west coast of Canada. She's American from the west coast from California, actually. So we kind of have this viewpoint of how we see things a little differently, and the bits of info that relate to either one of us, because in as much as she may be living in Canada now, and has been for, the last number of decades at this point, she's still an American, and she's still got her family, and a lot of her friends and all of these people are still down there, and she's involved with them. It's not like they've been left behind because she lives in another country. We spend a lot of time going down to California to visit family and friends. Actually, in theory, we have a big trip coming up later in 2025 here this year, as of the date of the recording of this video. So we'll see if that happens in the latter part of 2025. Actually, as well as another trip down to the States a bit earlier than that. So we kind of bring some different perspectives at it and can look at the news that interests us individually and bring those things to you and present it in an audio format. So we're discussing how we're going to find the timing for this, because if I already am struggling with time for editing and all this other stuff, we need to make sure we can find the time to actually sit down, set up some microphones, and record stuff and do that as well. So, maybe we might even do something like this, which is just a bit more guerrilla filmmaking, as it were, a little more freestyle, and do it that way. So we'll figure those things out as we go. But so that's what we're talking about doing there. But this last idea was just this concept of that we got in this conversation of talking about effectively Christians who aren't Christians, right? It is absolutely possible to sit there and claim the title of being a Christian all you want. But unless you're doing, as one speaker that we follow online says, unless you're doing Bible things in Bible ways, I would say you're not a Christian. Just sitting there saying that Jesus is my Lord and then continuing to live the way of the world, then your mouth is saying that he's your Lord, but your actions are saying he's not. And so that's that idea of you can claim Christianity without actually being a Christian. Just like I can sit here and claim that I'm an electrician, but unless I can actually put wires into a fuse box and set everything up and do all that, I'm not an electrician unless I have a ticket that shows that I've done the proper training and education to do that job. I can say I'm an electrician all I want, but I'm not. Same thing, being a plumber or a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I play one on TV. Any of that kind of stuff. So, and I think that applies to not just Christianity. Really, it could be anything, right? It could be any religion. It could be any label like that. Unless you're following through on that, unless you're walking it out instead of just saying it, then I would hazard a guess that you're not actually that, whatever that is. In this case, for our purposes, Christian. So the closing thought that I'll leave you on that one is we are told a little bit about this idea by the Messiah in the Bible when he's basically describing this idea to say, and stop me if you've heard this one, you can tell a tree by its fruit, right? A good tree produces good fruit. A bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree does not produce bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot produce good fruit. So once again, you can tell a tree by its fruit. What is the fruit? The combination of what you say and do. So it's not just your words, it's your actions. That is your fruit. So you look at the words and actions of any person. Is it consistent is what they're doing consistent with what they're saying? If it's not, they're bearing bad fruit. So, little lesson for you. And that applies to anyone. So, start exercising that muscle, as it were. Just look at people and say, are their actions lining up with their words? Are they bearing good fruit or bad fruit? Because you can tell a tree by its fruit. With that, I'm going to wrap up my meandering here. I've talked long enough. I'll say bye for now. We'll see how this free-form thing works, because, it's nice that I can basically turn this off and just make it available online and not have to do that extra work that I don't have a lot of time to do. Oh, there we go. If you've stuck with it until now, thanks for tuning in, checking out the video. I would ask that if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up. Share it with others. We're always promoting this idea of getting this word spread around as much as possible. And if you have not done so yet, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to all, so that you are notified to anything that any of us are putting up on the channel. And I'm still, hopeful, and I know at some point we'll make something happen where we'll be able to do some stuff on the channel that will be a combination of all of us. So looking forward to that. And until then, and until the next video, I will say shalom and bye for now.
You've been watching Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. If you have a comment, please leave it on the bottom of this video or email us at truthandtestimonyemail@gmail.com. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Truth and Testimony, the broadcast, is not affiliated with Truth and Testimony magazine.